The Galactic Council of Knowledge had existed for 17,000 years. In that time, we documented 46 million species, catalogued 900,000 planets, and solved countless mysteries of the universe. But there was one puzzle that eluded every brilliant mind from every advanced civilization: the quantum paradox of Nexus Prime. Until a human came along and made us all look like complete idiots. My name is Zorn Tak, senior historian of the Galactic Archives, and I'm still recovering from the embarrassment. You think you know humiliation? Try being part of a civilization that's mastered quantum travel, telepathic communication, and immortality serums, was only to be outsmarted by a species that still finds amusement in videos of their young falling over. The human's name was Dr. Leona Palmer, an utterly forgettable name for what turned out to be the most unforgettable being in recent galactic history. Are all your species this unimpressive looking? I asked when she first stepped off the transport vessel onto our station. Her body was so fragile, I feared our artificial gravity might crush her bones. Nice to meet you too, she replied with that strange human expression, the one where they show their teeth, but somehow don't mean it as a threat. I see the famous Triskelion hospitality is just as advertised. My assistant, Grak, vibrated his antennae in amusement. She got you there, boss. Silence, Grak, I hissed through my breathing slits. Dr. Palmer, welcome to Nexus Station Alpha. I am Zorn Tak, your liaison during this experiment. Experiment? She asked, raising one of those strange fur strips above her visual organs. Yes, the experiment to see if humans are truly intelligent enough to participate in galactic affairs, or if your apparent technological achievements were merely happy accidents. Dr. Palmer smiled again. Well, this is going to be fun. The Council had approved her visit after a lengthy debate. Humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 47 years ago, making them practically infants in galactic terms. Yet somehow, they'd managed to request access to our most puzzling artifact, the Nexus Cube, claiming they had a fresh perspective. The Council thought it might provide amusement, if nothing else. Little did we know. This way, Doctor, I said, leading her through the quantum-secured doors to the central chamber. The artifact has been here for over 9,000 years. It was discovered on a dead world orbiting a dying star in the Andromeda sector. And nobody has figured out what it does, she asked, already pulling out primitive scanning devices from her pack. 17 different species have tried. The brightest minds of the Triskelion Empire spent 3 centuries studying it. The quantum lords of Proxima Centauri devoted 5 generations to its mysteries. Even the hive intelligence of Sagittarius couldn't unlock its secrets. She said, not seeming particularly impressed. And what happened when they tried to open it? Grak's skin turned a pale blue, the Triskelion equivalent of wincing. The last attempt resulted in the complete molecular dissolution of Professor Zalvan and his entire research team. Oh, Palmer said, that's definitely suboptimal. The central chamber housed the infamous Nexus Cube, a perfect 30x30x30 centimeter object floating above an anti-gravity pedestal. It shimmered with a surface pattern that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. Its corners pulsed with an energy that defied our most advanced analysis. Beautiful, Palmer whispered, approaching slowly. May I walk around it? Certainly, I replied. Just don't touch it. The containment field will stop you anyway, but the last being who tried to bypass it became, well, they are still removing pieces of them from the ceiling in Section 7. Noted, she said dryly. For 3 hours, Palmer simply observed the cube, walking around it, taking measurements with her crude instruments, and muttering to herself. Occasionally, she would laugh, as if sharing a private joke with the universe. Finding something amusing, Doctor? I finally asked. Just thinking that this object might be the ultimate practical joke, she replied. 9,000 years on display and nobody knows what it does. Maybe it doesn't do anything. Maybe it's just some ancient alien's paperweight. That's absurd, I said, my neck frills extending in irritation. The energy readings alone indicate. I know, she interrupted. The energy readings indicate a power source equivalent to a small star. But has anyone considered that the energy might be a byproduct rather than its purpose? Greg looked at me. Actually, no, we always assumed the energy was the point. That's because you are all thinking like engineers, Palmer said. Maybe you should try thinking like archaeologists instead. Over the next 17 days, the human brought chaos to our perfectly organized research protocols. She requested bizarre materials, primitive pen and paper, different colored lights, even samples of various foods from across the galaxy. She spent hours just sitting and staring at the cube while eating something called potato chips that left grease stains on our ancient texts. The council members demanded daily reports, which became increasingly difficult to deliver. "What progress has the human made?" asked High Counselor Vrook, his 7 eyes blinking in sequence. She draws pictures of the cube from different angles and listens to rhythmic noise through personal audio devices. That's all? Yesterday she asked if we could pipe in whale songs from Earth's oceans. And this is the species that claims to have the answer. Ruck made the universal gesture for exasperation, all 7 tentacles splayed outward simultaneously. Perhaps we should terminate the experiment, suggested Counselor Zith. Give her more time, I found myself saying, though I couldn't explain why. Something about the human's confidence intrigued me. She wasn't working like any scientist I'd ever seen, yet she never seemed frustrated or doubtful. On the 18th day, Palmer requested a meeting with the full council. "You have solved it?" I asked incredulously. "Not exactly," she replied. "But I think I know why nobody else has." The council chamber fell completely silent when she walked in 37 of the galaxy's most powerful beings, representing 23 different species, all staring at the small human in their midst. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," Palmer began, "thank you for this opportunity. I believe the Nexus Cube is not a technological artifact as you have all assumed. It's a communication device." "We have considered that possibility," said Counselor Drath of the Silicon Consciousness. "But all communication frequencies have been tested." "Not all," Palmer replied. "You have been trying to communicate with it using technology, mathematics, and energy patterns. But I believe it responds to something else entirely, art." The council erupted in bemused chatter. "Silence," commanded High Counselor Vrook. "Explain yourself, human." Palmer projected images onto the central display. The patterns on the cube's surface change, but not randomly. They are responding to stimuli in the environment. When I played certain music near it, the patterns shifted in rhythm. When I showed it specific color combinations, it repeated those patterns. It's not trying to be solved, it's trying to have a conversation. "Preposterous," huffed Counselor Zeeth. "Art is a primitive recreational activity, not a form of communication sophisticated enough for advanced technology." Palmer smiled. "With respect, Counselor, that attitude might be exactly why you haven't solved this puzzle in 9,000 years. Greg vibrated his antennae nervously beside me. "Bold move," he whispered. "Too bold," I replied, though secretly I admired her courage. "I propose an experiment," Palmer continued. "Allow me to attempt communication with the cube using multiple art forms simultaneously. If I'm wrong, you lose nothing. If I'm right, well, you might finally get your answer." After much debate, the council agreed, though mostly out of curiosity than belief. The next day we assembled in the central chamber. Palmer had arranged an unusual collection of items, musical instruments from 17 worlds, light projectors, and even a small container of water. "Everyone, please stand back," she instructed. "And whatever happens, don't interfere." She began by playing a simple melody on an instrument she called a violin. The sounds were strange but not unpleasant. As she played, she activated the light projectors with her foot, casting colorful patterns against the walls. Then, most bizarrely, she began to dance, moving her body in rhythmic motions while continuing to play. "What is she doing?" whispered Counselor Drath. "I believe humans call it performance art," I replied, feeling embarrassed for her. But then something happened. The cube's surface patterns began changing more rapidly, matching the rhythm of her music. Its corners pulsed with the same colors as her light projections, when the containment field around it flickered. Observation logs indicate increased energy output, reported Grack, checking the monitors. The cube is responding. Palmer continued her performance, adding complexity to the music, the lights, and her movements. The cube's response intensified. Small tendrils of energy began to extend from its corners, reaching toward her like curious fingers. "Should we stop this?" asked Counselor Zeeth, clearly alarmed. "No," I said firmly. "Let her continue." Palmer's performance reached a crescendo. She was playing faster now, sweat beading on her forehead. The light patterns had become intricate fractals, and her movements more elaborate. The cube began to rotate in its containment field, something it had never done before. And then it happened. The cube split open along invisible seams, unfolding like a flower blooming in accelerated time. Inside was not machinery or weapons or any technology we recognized. It was a swirling vortex of colors and patterns, a visual symphony that matched Palmer's performance perfectly. From this vortex emerged a figure, translucent, shifting, beautiful. It had no definitive shape, instead flowing like water given consciousness. It hovered before Palmer, who had stopped playing but continued to sway slightly. "Hello," she said simply. The figure pulsed with light in response. It extended a tendril toward her face, not touching, but close enough that Palmer's hair moved slightly from some unseen energy. "I think it's saying hello back," she said, looking toward the council members with barely contained excitement. The being, for there was no doubt now that it was a living entity, began to create patterns in the air, complex mathematical equations mixed with artistic designs. Palmer nodded as if understanding. "It's been waiting," she explained to us, "for someone to speak to it properly." The cube wasn't a puzzle to be solved, it was a cocoon, a protective shell. And it was waiting for a species that understood art is as vital as science. "What is it?" I asked, approaching cautiously. "The last member of a species called the Lumina," Palmer replied, somehow extracting this information from the patterns. "They existed before any of your civilizations. They seeded the galaxy with the mathematical principles that eventually led to your technologies. But they couldn't survive in physical form as the universe aged, so they transformed themselves into energy and knowledge, preserving themselves in these cubes." The council members were speechless. 9,000 years of the brightest minds in the galaxy trying to crack open what we thought was a puzzle box, and all it took was one human playing a violin and dancing badly. The being continued its display, more urgent now. "It says there are more cubes," Palmer translated. "Hundreds, scattered throughout the galaxies. Each contains a Lumina elder, waiting to be awakened. Together they hold knowledge that could transform our understanding of the universe." "Why didn't it respond to any of our attempts at communication?" asked Counselor Drath. Palmer listened to the being's patterns. "Because you tried to force it open. You approached it as a problem to be solved, not a being to be understood. The Lumina don't respond to force or pure logic, they respond to creativity, to the marriage of art and science." She smiled. "Humans might be new to space travel, but we have been combining art and science since our first cave paintings. It's kind of our specialty." I looked at this small, fragile human who had accomplished in weeks what the combined genius of the galaxy couldn't manage in millennia, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in centuries: humility. "Dr. Palmer," I said, my voice unusually respectful, "it seems we owe you an apology, and perhaps our gratitude." She smiled that strange human smile again. "Ooh, apology needed, Zorn. But you might want to clear your schedule for the next few years. We have hundreds more of these cubes to open, and I think this is just the beginning of what the Lumina have to teach us." The being pulsed with light, creating a pattern that resembled a human handshake meeting a Triskelion greeting tendril. "I think," said Palmer, "this is the start of a beautiful friendship." And so began the most profound change in galactic history since the formation of the Council itself. All because one human understood what 17 advanced civilizations could not. Sometimes the universe doesn't want to be analyzed. Sometimes it just wants to dance. But the true revelations were yet to come. And the price for awakening the Lumina would be higher than any of us could have imagined. News of Dr. Palmer's breakthrough spread across the galaxy faster than quantum-entangled particles. Within days, research teams were scrambling to locate the other Lumina cubes. High Counselor Vrook established a special division dedicated to artistic communication with sentient energy beings, which sounded ridiculous every time I had to say it out loud. You realize the acronym for that is ACSEB, which in the Andorian dialect means pretentious waste of resources, I pointed out during one of our planning sessions. Would you prefer I named it the humans were right all along and we look like fools department? Vrook replied, all 7 eyes narrowed in annoyance. Dr. Palmer's status changed overnight from curious primitive to revered genius. The Council granted her unprecedented access to our technology, archives, and resources. She handled the attention with that strange human quality they call grace, which apparently means not constantly reminding everyone how wrong they were. I wish I could say the same for myself. So, Zorn, Palmer asked one morning as we prepared to examine a newly discovered cube from the Cygnus sector, when did you first realize you might be wrong about humans? Probably around the same time you opened a 9,000-year-old mystery with a violin solo and interpretive dance, I replied dryly. Though I'm still not convinced it wasn't a cosmic fluke. She laughed. Your species really struggles with admitting mistakes, don't you? Says the member of a species that spent centuries arguing whether their planet was flat. Clear point. She adjusted her instruments, preparing for another awakening ceremony. But we got over it. That's the thing about humans. We are remarkably good at being wrong, admitting it, and moving forward. Is that what you consider your evolutionary advantage? Being comfortable with failure? Palmer thought for a moment. Maybe. Or maybe it's that we never stop trying new approaches, even when logic says we should give up. Over the next 3 months, Palmer successfully awakened 7 more Lumina beings. Each one emerged with its own distinct personality and knowledge specialty. The first was a mathematician who revealed equations that rendered our quantum propulsion systems obsolete overnight. Another specialized in biological systems, providing cures for 17 previously untreatable diseases. The Galactic Council was ecstatic. Palmer became a celebrity across 27 star systems. Humans suddenly found themselves elevated from quaint newcomers to essential partners in galactic affairs. But Grack noticed something concerning. Have you observed the energy readings during each awakening? He asked me privately after the 7th Lumina emerged. They are increasing exponentially, I acknowledged. And the containment fields are having trouble compensating. That's not all. Grack's antennae drooped a sign of serious worry. The space-time fabric around each awakening site shows microfractures. They heal within hours, but they shouldn't be there at all. I finished his thought. We brought our concerns to Palmer, who was preparing for the awakening of the 8th cube, discovered buried beneath the ice plains of Rigel 9. You think the awakenings are damaging reality itself? She asked, frowning. The evidence suggests caution, I replied. Perhaps we should pause the program until we better understand the consequences. Palmer nodded slowly. I will talk to the Lumina we have already awakened. Maybe they can explain what's happening. The conversation with the Lumina Council, as they now called themselves, didn't go as expected. These fractures are a natural byproduct of our re-entry into your dimensional plane, explained Xylos, the first Lumina Palmer had awakened. Its luminous form pulsed with shades of blue and green as it spoke. They are temporary and harmless. But they are growing larger with each awakening, Palmer pointed out, displaying our readings. A mere statistical anomaly, replied Embra, the mathematician Lumina. Your measuring equipment isn't calibrated for trans-dimensional energy. I noticed something odd in their responses, a dismissiveness that contradicted their usually generous sharing of knowledge. Palmer noticed it too. You are not telling us everything, she said bluntly. As partners in this endeavor, We deserve the full truth. The Lumina beings exchanged patterns of light among themselves, a private conversation we couldn't interpret. Finally, Xylos spoke. Dr. Palmer, there are aspects of our existence that would be difficult for dimensional beings to comprehend. Trust that we have the best interests of all life forms in our calculations. That's not good enough, Palmer insisted. If these awakenings pose any risk to the galaxy, we need to know. The greatest risk, said Embra coolly, would be leaving our brethren dormant when they could be helping advance your civilizations by millennia. We left the meeting without clear answers. As we walked back to the research center, Palmer was uncharacteristically quiet. You believe they are hiding something, I said. It wasn't a question. Don't you? She replied. That was classic deflection. I have seen the same behavior from grant committees when they don't want to admit they have already decided to cut your funding. Despite our concerns, the Council voted to continue the Awakening program. The potential benefits outweighed the theoretical risks, they argued. The eighth Lumina emerged the next day, this one specializing in weapons technology. It immediately offered designs for planetary defense systems far beyond our current capabilities. Curious, I said to Palmer after reviewing the specifications. Why would an advanced species that values art and communication prioritize weapons development? I was wondering the same thing, she replied. They claim to be peaceful knowledge keepers, yet 4 of the 8 awakened Lumina have offered military technologies. Rack, who had been analyzing the space-time readings, burst into my quarters that night, his skin flashing urgent patterns of warning colors. The fractures aren't healing, he said without preamble. The one from yesterday's awakening is actually growing. Growing how fast? I asked, already dreading the answer. Doubling every 6 hours. And it's emitting a signal, a beacon of some kind. Palmer, when informed, insisted on confronting the Lumina Council immediately. We found them in their assigned chamber, their energy forms intertwined in what appeared to be deep communion. Explain the beacon, Palmer demanded, bypassing diplomatic protocol entirely. The Lumina separated, silos floating forward. Dr. Palmer, you seem distressed. The space-time fracture from yesterday's awakening is growing and emitting a signal into deep space. What is it calling? The 7 other Lumina pulsed rapidly, their colors shifting to deep reds and purples. It is merely a harmonic resonance, Silos claimed. It's a natural byproduct of— Stop, Palmer interrupted. No more evasions. Tell us the truth or we halt all further awakenings immediately. There was a tense silence. Then Embra moved forward. Very well. The signal is a beacon, but not for anything dangerous. It simply helps align the dimensional gateways for our remaining kindred. And the growing fracture? I pressed. A temporary distortion that will stabilize once a critical mass of Lumina are awakened. Palmer crossed her arms. How many constitutes a critical mass? Approximately 100, said Embra. And what happens then? Palmer asked. Another exchange of light patterns among the Lumina. Then we can begin the true sharing of knowledge, Silos replied. Currently, we are limited by your dimensional constraints. Once enough of us are present, we can establish a permanent connection between our realm and yours. The explanation sounded reasonable, but something still felt wrong. Palmer must have sensed it too, because she requested access to monitor the fracture directly. The Lumina agreed, perhaps too readily. Later, in the privacy of my quarters, Palmer paced back and forth. They are lying, she said flatly, or at least not telling the whole truth. I agree, I replied, but the Council won't halt the program without concrete evidence. Then we need to get some. She stopped pacing. The 9th cube is scheduled for awakening tomorrow. I want to try something different. Different how? I want to communicate with the being inside before we fully wake it. Establish a connection while it's still contained. Is that possible? I don't know. But art is about reaching across boundaries. Maybe I can reach across this one too. The next day, With the ninth cube floating in its containment field, Palmer approached the procedure differently. Instead of the full awakening ceremony, she began with just simple violin notes, long, sustained tones that seemed to hang in the air. "What are you doing?" whispered High Counselor Vrook, who had come to witness this awakening personally. Asking a question, Palmer replied without elaboration. She played for nearly an hour, the same sequence of notes repeated with slight variations. Just when the council members were growing visibly impatient, the cube responded not by opening, but by emitting its own musical tones. "It's working," Palmer whispered. She adjusted her playing, creating what sounded to me like a musical conversation. The cube's surface patterns shifted rapidly, forming not just abstract designs but recognizable symbols, an ancient form of mathematical notation that predated even the council's records. "Grack, are you recording this?" I asked urgently. "Every bit," he confirmed, his scientific curiosity overriding his anxiety. Palmer continued talking to the cube for another hour, her music growing more complex, the cube's responses likewise evolving. Finally, she lowered her violin, her face pale. "We need to stop the program," she announced to the stunned council members. "Right now." "Explain yourself," demanded Vrook. "The Lumina aren't what they claim to be," Palmer said. "They are not knowledge keepers, they are refugees. Their dimension is dying, and they need a new home." "How could you possibly determine that from musical tones?" Counselor Zith asked skeptically. "Because music is mathematics, emotion and communication combined," Palmer replied. "And this being just told me the truth that the others have been hiding. The fractures aren't side effects, they are the point. Once enough lumina are awakened and enough fractures created, they can tear open a permanent portal between dimensions." "And why would that be concerning?" asked Vrook. "If their realm is dying, should we not offer sanctuary?" "Because their dimension is dying for a reason," Palmer said grimly. "They drained it of its fundamental energy, and they will do the same to ours." The council erupted in chaotic debate. The Lumina Council was summoned to address these accusations. "This is absurd," Silos stated, its form pulsing with indignant reds. "We have shared nothing but beneficial knowledge that makes us dependent on you," Palmer countered. "Military systems that only you fully understand, medical treatments that require your ongoing guidance. You are not sharing knowledge, you are creating dependency." "The being in the ninth cube seems to disagree with your narrative," I added. A confused elder, disoriented by millennia of confinement, Embra dismissed. "Surely you won't jeopardize galactic advancement based on such flimsy evidence?" The debate raged for hours. The council was divided, with many unwilling to abandon the technological windfalls the Lumina offered. But the fracture continued to grow, and our sensors detected unusual energy fluctuations around each of the awakened Lumina. Finally, Palmer played her trump card. "If you won't act on my warning, at least agree to this postpone further awakenings for 1 month while we study the existing fracture. If I'm wrong, 1 month is nothing in galactic terms. If I'm right, it could save our universe." Reluctantly, the council agreed to the moratorium. The Lumina protested but were overruled. That night, disaster struck. Alarms blared throughout the station. I rushed to the containment center to find chaos. All 7 awakened Lumina had broken free of their assigned quarters and converged on the vault containing the remaining cubes. "They are accelerating their plan," Palmer shouted over the alarms. "They know we are onto them." The Lumina had somehow merged into a single, massive energy construct that was absorbing the station's power. The fracture had expanded dramatically, now visible as a shimmering tear in the fabric of reality itself. "Can we close it?" I asked desperately. "Not conventionally," Palmer replied. "But maybe?" She looked at the ninth cube, still sealed in its containment field. "Maybe fire with fire." While security forces attempted to contain the Lumina construct, Palmer rushed to the ninth cube. Instead of trying to awaken it fully, she began playing a new melody, something haunting and mournful. "What are you doing?" I asked. Asking for help, she replied between notes. This one didn't want to drain our dimension. Maybe it can show us how to stop the others. The cube began to pulse in rhythm with her music. The containment field flickered but held. Slowly, a small tendril of energy emerged from the cube, not breaking free, but extending like a cautious hand. Palmer reached out her own hand to meet it. The moment they touched, she gasped. "I understand now," she whispered. She turned to me, her expression resolute. The lumina exist as energy because they evolved beyond physical form, but that evolution came at a cost. They can only sustain themselves by consuming the fundamental energy of a dimension. They have burned through countless universes before ours. How do we stop them? They are energy beings. They respond to patterns. If we can create a counter-resonance to their beacon. She didn't finish the thought, instead racing to the station's main power core, dragging the ninth cube's containment field with us. The friendly lumina tendril remained connected to her. Every dimension has its own harmonic frequency, Palmer explained hurriedly as she began reconfiguring the power distribution system. The lumina are using the fractures to tune our dimension to theirs, making it easier to traverse. But we can reverse it. How? By creating a dissonance they can't cross. She looked at me seriously. But it will require channeling all of the station's power through the ninth cube. The friendly lumina will act as a converter, transforming the energy into the right frequency. That could destroy the station, I pointed out. Yes, she agreed simply. It will. Before I could protest, she added, we have already evacuated most personnel to the lower levels. They should survive. And what about you? The converter will need manual adjustment throughout the process. She smiled, that strange human smile again. Someone has to play the music, Zorn. I found myself saying, then I will stay too. Rack, who had been quietly assisting all along, raised his manipulator appendages. As will I. The lumina construct had nearly finished absorbing the remaining cubes. The fracture had grown large enough to see through to the other side, a swirling, chaotic dimension filled with billions of waiting lumina forms. Palmer positioned herself with her violin before the power core, the friendly lumina tendril now wrapped around the instrument. Grack and I monitored the systems, ready to channel the power on her signal. On my mark, she said, raising her bow. 3, 2, 1. She began to play not the gentle, inquiring music from before, but something powerful and primal. The friendly lumina amplified each note, transforming it into pulses of counter-resonant energy. Now, Palmer shouted. We diverted the station's entire power supply through the cube. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The waves of energy radiated outward, colliding with the fracture's edges. The lumina construct shrieked a sound like tearing metal and shattering glass combined. It's working, Grack exclaimed. The fracture began to contract, its edges pulled inward by Palmer's counter-resonance. The lumina construct fought desperately, pouring more energy into keeping it open. We need more power, Palmer shouted, her bow moving faster, sweat pouring down her face. There isn't any more, I replied. Palmer locked eyes with me. Yes, there is. She nodded toward the friendly lumina tendril. It's offering itself. Full conversion of its energy could provide the final push we need. That would destroy it completely, I realized. It knows. It's the only member of its species that remembers their original purpose to observe and appreciate the universe, not consume it. It wants to make amends. With a final nod of understanding, Palmer played one last, perfect note. The friendly lumina flared brilliantly, its entire being converting to the counter-resonant frequency. The wave that erupted was blinding, knocking us all off our feet. When my vision cleared, the fracture was gone. So was the lumina construct, the cubes, and the friendly tendril. All that remained was the smoking ruins of the power core and 3 very stunned survivors. 2 weeks later, the Galactic Council held an emergency session aboard their flagship vessel. The Nexus station was being rebuilt, and a new policy on unknown artifacts had been implemented, one that included artistic analysis alongside scientific study. Dr. Palmer, began High Counselor Vrook, your actions saved not just this galaxy but potentially our entire dimension. The Council wishes to extend its deepest gratitude. Palmer, still recovering from energy burns along her arms, nodded respectfully. Furthermore, Vrook continued, we wish to formally invite humanity to take a permanent seat on the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The chamber erupted in approving murmurs, a far cry from the skepticism that had greeted Palmer's arrival months earlier. That's very kind, Palmer replied. But I think humanity still has a lot to learn before we are ready for that responsibility. Instead, I propose a different arrangement. Oh? Vrook's 7 eyes blinked in sequence, indicating curiosity. Create a new division within the Council, one dedicated to interdisciplinary approaches to galactic mysteries. Staff it with members of all species, but ensure that art, music, philosophy, and science are given equal weight. A radical notion, muttered Councillor Zeeth. Maybe, Palmer agreed. But if recent events proved anything, it's that the universe is far stranger than any single approach can comprehend. Sometimes you need a mathematician. Sometimes you need a quantum physicist. And sometimes, she smiled, you need a violinist. The Council approved her proposal unanimously. The new division was named a Harmonic Analysis and Unified Methods Department. You realize the acronym for that is HAM, which in ancient Earth languages means home, I pointed out to Palmer as we left the chamber. I know, she replied with a wink. Humans are good at naming things. As I watch her shuttle depart for Earth, I can't help but reflect on how drastically one small human changed our understanding of the universe. We had millennia of technological advancement, countless brilliant minds, and the combined knowledge of dozens of civilizations. But what we lacked was perspective, the ability to see patterns not just as problems to solve, but as conversations to join. The willingness to approach the unknown with creativity rather than just analysis. The courage to play music to a cube and expect an answer. Perhaps that's humanity's true gift to the galaxy. Not their technology or their science, but their stubborn insistence that there's always another way to look at things. And their terrible dancing, of course. That too. This is Zorn Tak, senior historian of the Galactic Archives and the first Triskelion to take violin lessons, signing off.